Welcome back to the Movie Dash channel. Today, we're diving deep into the 2010 crime thriller 13. Spoilers ahead, so buckle up and make sure to pay attention. The film opens in a dark, tense moment. Vince, holding a gun, stands face to face with another man, each pointing their weapon at the other. The air is thick with suspense as they wait for the perfect moment to fire. As the seconds tick by, Vince's mind races back to the events that led him to this life-or-death standoff. 4 days earlier in Ohio, Vince, his mother, and his sisters made the difficult decision to sell their family home. They need the money to cover his father's mounting medical bills after a severe accident left him bedridden and in need of costly surgeries. Vince visits his father in the hospital every day, trying to stay hopeful despite the financial strain. Vince works as an electrician, taking on various jobs with a range of clients. On one such day, he meets Mr. Harrison, a man whose life is about to intersect with his in the most unexpected way. Harrison has just received a mysterious letter, one that causes him to act in ways that seem out of character. Vince overhears a conversation between Harrison and his girlfriend about this letter, which promises an enormous sum of money for something he has to do. Vince doesn't know exactly what's going on, but the mention of wealth piques his curiosity. Later that evening, Vince returns home to celebrate his youngest sister's birthday. She has an unusual wish. She wants a lamb. Vince, amused by her innocence, agrees to help fulfill her dream, though he knows the family's financial situation is far from ideal. On the other side of the country, Jasper Baggs, a desperate and unscrupulous man, meets with a group of shady individuals. They lend him $2 million, but with a steep price. He must pay back $3 million within 3 days. It's a deal that seems almost impossible to fulfill, and the pressure is clearly mounting on Jasper. Back in Ohio, Vince continues his daily hospital visits, but the news isn't good. The doctor informs him that his father's condition is worsening, and another surgery will be required, further escalating the family's debt. Later that day, Vince returns to work at Mr. Harrison's house. While there, he overhears Harrison talking to a friend about a special job that promises to bring in a huge amount of money in just 1 day. Harrison is anxious about it, mentioning that he's had good luck in the past, but is still haunted by the memories of what happened before. After the conversation ends, Harrison retreats to his room to relax, but things take a tragic turn when he accidentally overdoses and dies. Shortly after the authorities arrive and ask their questions, Vince is allowed to leave. As he's about to head out, however, Vince sees the envelope on Harrison's desk, the one containing the mysterious letter. Curiosity gets the better of him, and he steals it. Inside, he finds a train ticket to New York and a CPS receipt for pickup. Following the instructions in the envelope, Vince heads to the post office, where he picks up a package. The clerk asks for his ID, and Vince complies, receiving a small package containing a new phone, $500 in cash, a key, and a letter marked with a spider logo. The instructions are clear. He must use the money for the hotel in New York and only use the provided phone to communicate. The letter warns him not to use his own phone and assures him that further instructions will come soon. Soon after, Mr. Harrison's girlfriend reports the missing envelope, and the police investigate. Detective Mullane, who has been following the trail of mysterious envelopes linked to high-stakes gambling, is alerted to Vince's involvement. The cops track Vince's movements and begin to follow him closely. The next day, Vince dresses in his best suit and boards the train to New York, unaware that a detective is tailing him. When he arrives, he checks into the hotel and waits for the next set of instructions. In the middle of the night, his phone rings. A voice on the other end tells him to follow a series of directions, posing as Harrison. Vince, unsure of where this will lead but desperate for answers, follows the orders without hesitation. The next morning, Vince heads to a Postnet store by Grand Central and uses the key to open a P.O. box. Inside, he finds another envelope with a new train ticket, another cork with the number 13 marked on it, and a new set of instructions. This time, his ticket is for a town called Macomb, but the instructions specify that he must get off 1 stop early. Vince follows the directions, getting off at the correct station, but the cops are still tracking him, unaware of his next move. As he leaves the station, Vince hops into a cab, but shortly after, he's intercepted by another car. The driver is Jack, who reveals he's part of the operation and shows Vince his own cork with the number 13. The two exchange cryptic words before Jack takes Vince in his car and drives him deep into the woods. They reach an old shack, where Vince is subjected to a rigorous inspection. His clothes are stripped, and even the heels of his shoes are cut off to ensure he isn't hiding anything. Afterward, he's transported to a lavish mansion that serves as the venue for the high-stakes game he's unwittingly entered. At the mansion, Vince meets Joe, his assigned sponsor. Though Vince tries to explain that Harrison is dead and that he's just taking his place, Joe is less than impressed. But he knows that letting Vince participate is the only way to avoid trouble with the other patrons. Inside the mansion, Vince is introduced to the deadly competition. It's a Russian roulette tournament where each participant is given a loaded gun, and they must take turns aiming at one another while the others do the same. When the signal is given, they must pull the trigger. Vince is incredibly nervous, but with Jack's help, he loads his gun and prepares for the first round. When the light finally flashes, signifying the start of the game, Vince is paralyzed by fear. The first few shots ring out, and several men fall. It's only when Vince realizes that if he doesn't shoot, he will be killed that he finally gathers the courage to pull the trigger. Miraculously, the man in front of him survives. Vince barely escapes the first round, but he's shaken and terrified. The competition escalates from there. As more participants are eliminated, the stakes grow higher. The players are pushed to their limits, and the psychological toll of the game starts to show. Jasper, who has placed a large bet on his own brother, Ronald, is forced to watch his siblings' mental state deteriorate. Meanwhile, Vince survives, barely, through each round, each time by pure luck. The participants are pushed to extreme measures to cope with the stress. Some are given morphine to help them endure, while others break down entirely. With each passing round, the remaining participants become fewer, and Vince begins to realize that his only way out is to win the game. In the third round, things take an even darker turn when each gun is loaded with 3 bullets. The survivors now number only 5: Vince, Jefferson, Ronald, number 3, and number 9. As the rounds continue, the tension between the participants reaches its peak, with more psychological games being played alongside the literal ones. Vince, though nervous, keeps his focus and manages to survive the chaos. The final stage of the competition is a one-on-one duel. The remaining patrons place their bets, with Joe putting his faith in Vince. In the ultimate test, Vince faces off against Ronald in a high-stakes showdown. The rules are simple. Both players are given 3 bullets, and they must shoot at each other. The two face each other, holding their guns steady. When the first round ends, neither player is hit. In a strange twist, the second round goes the same way. Neither player falls. But on the third try, Ronald is the one who falls, and Vince is crowned the winner. Vince is handed the grand prize, nearly $2 million. But the joy of victory is short-lived. The weight of the deaths he has witnessed weighs heavily on his conscience. Vince is congratulated by Joe and the other patrons, but he can't shake the feeling of being trapped in this deadly game. Desperate to escape, Vince manages to slip away unnoticed. As he makes his way to the train station, he hides the money, but his escape doesn't go unnoticed. The taxi driver who picked him up the day before calls the police, and soon Vince is cornered. Detective Mullane interrogates him, but Vince cleverly spins the story, claiming that he was dropped in the forest after being identified as an imposter. With no evidence to prove otherwise, the detective reluctantly lets him go. Back at the train station, Vince retrieves his money from a trash can, but his relief is short-lived when he realizes someone has switched out the trash bags. After frantically searching, he recovers his cash, but it's clear that he can't keep it with him. So, he sends the money to his family through registered mail, hoping they will receive it safely. To be cautious, he calls his mother, warning her to expect the package and to be sure someone is at home to receive it. The next morning, Vince takes a final train ride back to Ohio, but fate has other plans. As the train makes its first stop, Jasper catches up with him. He thinks Vince's plush lamb is hiding the money and shoots him, stealing the bag. As Vince lies dying, he swallows the post office receipt, thinking of his family one last time as the train continues on its journey.